or that and all these
Mhm.
diets, and it's not logical. It's illogical. Now, if you talk to me, it's like, use your logics. Why would you eat meat and a bunch of fruit and call yourself meat-based? How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, sorry, and I'm like, a doctor's pushing this ideology, but people will try it and then they'll feel like garbage on it. And then I'll just like 1+1 is 2. You don't need a
Yeah.
lot of high intelligence just to listen to people and find out that if you've got 1,000 people, 2 people did well on this diet and 998 did terrible. So
Yeah.
I've learned through my people. I'm not going to
Yeah.
learn through some biased study.
Welcome to the Protecting Your Nest podcast. Have you been so successful with your low carb, keto, or carnivore diet that you never questioned rather it's the best dietary pattern for you, even when faced with unexpected challenges? It's crucial that we constantly challenge our conventional thinking and remain flexible, if not skeptical, about our diet. This gives us the permission to course correct whenever we are not getting the results we need or when we are having unexpected symptoms that may resolve after making some adjustments. Always remember that although all our bodies have a lot in common, we do have some uniqueness about ourselves compared to others. In other words, what works for you may not work for them because we all have unique genetic makeups and lifestyle factors that influence our nutritional needs. Another thing to consider is that our bodies are constantly changing. What works for you now may not work in the future. So it's important to listen to our bodies and adjust our diets accordingly. And when it comes to the science of diet, new research is always emerging. Science is always evolving, and new studies may challenge previously held beliefs about certain diets. So we must stay open minded and be willing to adapt to be successful. Today, I wanted to introduce you to a guest who always challenges how we think about low carb, keto, and carnivore, and is someone I think you will enjoy meeting. Today's guest is Stephanie of the wonderful Stephanie Keto Person YouTube channel. Back in the day, she was skateboarding when she was in her late teens, but now she's a personal trainer. She found herself in the low carb, high fat community after learning of its benefits and helping to treat her mom's cancer. And she's been off to the races ever since. She's now taking her self taught knowledge about this dietary pattern and sharing it with her over 100,000 YouTube subscribers. So make sure to check out her channel and subscribe. And with that, Stephanie, I welcome you to the podcast.
Why, thank you, Dr. Tony. How are you?
Having a good day. I was, our small talk before we started was me sharing that me and my wife will be going to make some personalized perfumes at a place called Aroma Workshops. Haven't done that before. I don't even wear much cologne, but you got to spend some time, quality time with each other, and that's what we're going to do after our recording. So looking forward to that. We're recording this for those who don't know on the holiday, and I'm really excited about that Labor Day holiday weekend.
Yes.
So having said that, let's have our conversation. We've been wanting to chat for a while, and I really appreciate the work you're doing on your wonderful YouTube channel. So let's start with, for you personally, um, were there any problems you were trying to solve when you started your low carb keto journey?
No, I wasn't particularly trying to solve any personal problems. This is back in the day, right? So we're going on 17 years now. And
Wow.
it was personal training. Yeah, long time. As personal training. Well, actually, it feels like yesterday, to be honest. As personal training clients at that time. So it was really easy to try it on myself, of course, my mother, and all the clients. So with 3 camps there, I started to learn a lot, and I started to do the YouTube videos and got everything wrong at that point. But yeah, it's been a long time.
Yeah, time flies, and when I think back on my career as a doctor, again, it was always mentioned that lifestyle was important, but it was never emphasized, and it's shocking that That's true, and unfortunately, it may still be true in many of the training programs in the country. So we still have work to do, which is again why we have to get in front of people, and sometimes you have to go straight to the people and let them grow as you grow in knowledge. So I really appreciate that. Of course, we mentioned your mom, and she was dealing with a diagnosis of cancer. So tell my audience her story and how you landed at keto to help her.
Sure. Well, we live in a toxic soup world, and I didn't realize how toxic it was until 3.5 years ago, but I digress. When you developed when you develop things like cancer, they'll literally tell you that it's either genetic or they just don't understand why it developed. But it's
Hmm.
so clear now in retrospect when I look back. My mom was a longtime smoker. Then she had gained weight. Like she had gotten over 200 pounds. She's 5'6", and it was the first time I saw her like truly overweight. She was like baking and eating a lot of sugary things at that time and going through stress. She was starting to act a little forgetful. It was very weird. And one day, uh, a friend came over and was knocking on the door, and she could see inside the window my mom was seizuring on the ground. So, yeah. So they got inside and they took her to the hospital, and they did ran tests, and they found a massive glioblastoma in her brain, which is a very aggressive brain type of cancer or tumor. And the doctors were like, it's not looking good. She's got maybe like, basically they say it like this: there's less than 1% of people that survive. Such an aggressive HERS had already grown so much, and we can try to do chemo and radiation, but the likelihood of it just going away forever is very slim to none. So she did that, and the tumor just, and they cut it out. They cut out as much as they could. And of course,
Hmm.
any tumor cells that are left over start to regrow, and it just started regrowing. Like that's that, just like they said, boom, started growing really fast again. So that was all for naught. And then at that time, if I would have known then what I know now, I would have never okayed chemo and all that.
Hmm.
But she actually developed, this is stuff I almost never talk about, but she had post-operative swelling. That's what really jacked her up. The speech centers of her, that's why I don't put her on camera that often. I
Hmm.
do on my Instagram, but the speech centers of her brain, her gait, she was wobbly, she stutters, she has a hard time communicating because of that post-operative swelling. But anyway, um I had heard about the ketogenic diet. I mean, long time ago. I don't know
Hmm.
how. I can't remember from what. So I said, we've got to, and it wasn't just me, it was me and my brother. And well, he didn't know anything about keto, but he was doing his research, I was doing mine. So we cut out her sugar, her fruit, her carbs, her garbage, her this, her that. The one thing that my brother wanted to do was cut down on the meat. And I was like, I don't know about that. That doesn't make any
Hmm.
sense. But uh, from that juncture, I was trying to get her to eat no carbs and as much fat as possible. Now, mind you, this is so early on, I didn't know what I was doing. Some
Hmm.
people make me like the keto cancer specialist. That I am not. Although I have learned a lot since I've worked with so many people with cancer from my mom. But at that point, I mean, myself and my mom I was okaying things like nut butters and things of this nature. But the reality is the lesion that was, cancerous was starting to grow back. It stopped. And so I never tell people that I stopped my mom's glioblastoma when trying to implement a ketogenic diet and trying to get her fat up and trying not to lower her protein, trying to do the diet with her.
Hmm.
But I mean, we did a lot of strategies, like vitamin C infusions, bunch of weird stuff, bunch of, apricot, because there's a little bit of SIO stuff in the apricot seeds. I won't say the word because of all this stupid censoring. But
Right.
We tried everything and it stopped growing, and she had MRIs every 6 months and it just never grew back. It's
That's
still in her brain, just chilling out. And that's that.
that's, and it's been how many years now?
17. So the doctors did MRIs for 5 years. They're like, we don't understand.
I know, right? Um,
Okay.
wow.
Yeah.
I always share with my patients, the, cancer class I did with Dr. Paul Merrick. He's not really in the low carb community per se, but his organization did a monograph. I'll share that, um, link, and I did a podcast with him where we just talked about, why we think cancer is a metabolic disease. So, um, at the minimum, we should be having a conversation with patients with cancer about their diet, and at the maximum, we should make that one of the primary ways to treat it. Now, for all those who are checking us out, it is true that the two leading causes of preventable death remain the two things your mom was dealing with, which is obesity and smoking. And obesity has gone from second place to first place. So just addressing the impact obesity has on our body, inflammation, etc., and the toxic nature of smoking. And it is also true that only half the people who get lung cancer, as an example, actually were smokers. So now we know there's other toxic things. You mentioned stress that impact us. So our goal is to just mitigate the stressors in our life as much as possible. We're not going to be perfect, but to the extent you do that, that'll be the extent to which you'll reduce the risk of disease. And what I love about what you also said is there was some side effects potentially of chemo. And we don't want to not use conventional interventions. Like surgery was a good idea, probably, at the time, maybe.
It's like
But
Leo.
the
I mean, if you leave one cell over, it's just going to start regrowing,
Right,
which is
exactly, right? But when
so.
we don't feed cancer, right? If we don't feed it the wrong stuff, like if we don't give it the glucose and that glycolysis that occurs where it gets its 2 ATP because it needs something quick and quick and quick versus a more efficient approach like oxidative phosphorylation where you get 34 ATP, which takes more time. If we just starve cancer, it changes everything. I'm just happy you kind of won the lottery and ended up with something that helped your mom. Most people will never have that experience. Maybe they will if they keep hearing these conversations. But I really am happy that your mom's still around to enjoy just life in general. So one of the things that kind of attracted me to interviewing you was you had dark skin, maybe a lighter version of dark skin, but so few people.
I know. Yeah, I'm pretty dark right now with the
Right,
vitamin.
okay, right. And I
With
know
the,
you
with
like being outdoors, right?
the
I see that tan,
yeah.
right?
Well,
So
this is a visual interview, right?
it's both.
Yeah. Okay.
It'll
Audio.
be both. Yeah, it'll be both. It'll be on the podcast app. So some people will listen and some people will see it on YouTube. But so it's both. And I agree. So you're right. I can see it, but there's so few people of color in the low carb space. So what's your thoughts on that when they need so much help?
Oh gosh. Okay. I mean, it's just cultural, unfortunately, and we're coming from a world of. I mean, I'm gonna mind how I express myself because these are on these platforms, but pretty much if you're coming out of slavery. But yeah, I know that families back in the day were more cohesive, so I think it's the fragmenting of the black family, particularly when they started implementing um, the welfare system.
Mhm. Mhm.
I really do believe in that you could get paid and more money per child. And I mean, if you're struggling in a society that has some biased tendencies because of the color of your skin, and then they
Mhm.
create programs where you could just get free money per child. Yeah. So I think that now when we fast forward to this space, I mean, it's no coincidence that the food is garbage. in these
Mhm.
neighborhoods, and a lot of liquor stores and things. Garbage is more accessible than quality things. And I mean, I'm not one of those people that are all like, "Oh my god, everybody's so racist." I'm not like that,
Right.
because now
Right.
I'm not. Like, I'm over it now. I'm more about what's happening to our planet in general.
Mhm.
But so I will put zero attention these days on people being, you know, I'm just trying to mind my words because of these stupid platforms.
Oh, yeah, that's okay.
Yeah, but I do think that when you're raised in a low income black neighborhood, you're not going to see people like us to gravitate towards. So if you
Mhm.
take Dr. Sabi, who's like this nutcase but had some good stuff, vegan, you know, healer. I don't even know if he was a doctor, but a lot of people, no, they would just follow him because he was black.
Mhm.
So there just wasn't enough. There's just not enough people like us to gravitate towards. And now I'm such a radical that black people still follow other people that give really horrible advice just because I tell them stuff that appears to be too difficult to do. So now
Right.
I've lost. Now my skin color doesn't even matter at this juncture. They're like, oh, okay, it's true. They were like, oh, she wants me to do what? Now I'll just follow this person who makes it sound 10 times easier. And that might be Mindy or Cindy or Wendy out there.
Interesting. Yeah. Well, I'm glad you brought up Dr. Sabi because that gentleman was good intention, I would assume, but he basically became a herbalist specialist. But again, so he learned herbal medicine, but didn't have the traditional training. And people are looking for hope. And I think when you combine his more plant-based approach with the narrative that you hear in general, maybe even they hear that from their doctors, then it's easier to realize, okay, maybe plants are the answer. Um, I and I also agree. I mean, I before my at some point I was doing a lot of real estate and I had 5 buildings and some of those tenants had Section 8 and it is very difficult to say to a person who has a $1,200 rent, they may pay 50 of those $1,200 and then say to them, if you get a job, we're going to make you pay 5 or 600 of those $1,200. There's no incentive. So I think so I do want to live in a world where we support people who may not have the same opportunities because of so many factors. It would take a whole podcast to discuss. But I also want to live in a world where we incentivize people in a better way. And I just think we don't do a good job. And of course, if you go to a local grocery store in the quote unquote neighborhoods where people have less resources, you will find nothing but garbage. But and to be honest, when I was in Sam's, and we shop on the outer part of the grocery store, we always tell people, well, they got a lot of garbage there too. So even in an environment where it's not in the middle of the neighborhood and you have maybe access to more options, it's still the culture is filled with options that don't serve us. But I appreciate again no matter how people perceive you, I'm just happy when they see your face, they see something that they don't see as often. So therefore, it may intrigue somebody to at
It
least
does.
hear what you have to say.
It does. Thank you. No, they run across my channel. A lot of people go and, they've either heard of me or something of this nature, and they'll flick on it for a second. And I speak to those who want me to talk to them at that point.
Yep.
So, but yeah, most people know who I am, but they'll be like, "Oh no, she makes things look too hard. I'm not quitting my coffee. I'm not eating
Okay,
liver. I'm not doing these things."
I hear you. Well, one of the things that I liked about your channel is that with my functional medicine training, I talk about things that you have talked about, grounding, the importance of sunlight, obviously the importance of getting rest and sleep. So, having been self-trained, where did all of that come from? Did it just evolve because of that's who you were as a person, or did you learn something along your way that made you realize there's more to it than just reducing carbs?
I think that I'm sort of an autodidact. It's like if you talk to enough people, like I've talked to over 10,000 people, like if you don't learn something,
Yeah.
there's something wrong with you. If you don't focus on like sponsors and making money and you actually focus on the people, you will learn something. And for example, people with histamine intolerance, I don't know if it's my Wi-Fi that's glitching or yours. Does it look clear on your end?
Yeah, and by the way, for you, it's the platform we use, it'll do that, but we're good.
Oh, okay, okay, good. Yeah. So, with on my end, I find the human body compelling, interesting. I find the human condition, history, and just how the body works, how we have these incredible brains, but they didn't have the insight and fortitude enough to run to the top of the hills with a tsunami in Thailand. Like we are not connected, but we're connected. It's very interesting because I have horses, and the horses can feel your heartbeat from 4 feet away, and they sync up with yours. But we don't connect with each other very well. We've lost that component because we're just so modernized and living in a bubble plus another bubble on top of another bubble, so we don't feel things anymore. But I think that if you stop and pay attention, there's all these debates about like eating fruit or this or that and all these
Mhm.
diets, and it's not logical. It's illogical. Now, if you talk to me, it's like use your logics. Why would you eat meat and a bunch of fruit and call yourself meat based? How does that make any sense? It doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
So, um, sorry, and I'm like a doctor's pushing this ideology, but people will try it and then they'll feel like garbage on it, and then I'll just like 1 plus 1 is 2. You don't need a
Yeah.
lot of high intelligence just to listen to people and find out that if you've got 1,000 people, 2 people did well on this diet, and 998 did terrible. So
Yeah.
I've learned through my people. I'm not going to
Yeah.
learn through some biased study. No, like I remember the first study they came out with ketogenic diets. It was a twin study for 30 days. And I was like, at that time, I was like, who's going to adapt in 30 days? Already, this
Right.
study is garbage, like useless
Yeah.
study.
Yeah, we both have similar understandings. You've done a lot of research. I've done that plus maybe some of my training when I did my functional medicine and nutrition training. We had to learn how to read studies and understand why one study is of a high quality and another isn't. Obviously, a 10-day study is not going to be of high quality on its face. So therefore, it takes longer than that just to metabolically change your body when you're making dietary changes. So I think you're right, and that's the disconnect because the layperson who has not had the opportunity to read all of that science and understand it, they just go with what the abstract says and they just go with that. So it's important that we understand that, and I'm glad you kind of suggested that maybe it's hard to call it a diet animal based or, for lack of better words, carnivore if you're also eating 200 or 300 carbs in the form of fruit. Having said that, I think, again, I want to hear some of your thoughts about you're in the low carb space and we have people who go to the more extreme and become carnivores. And one of the things that attracted me to wanting to talk to you is you question everything, and very few people in the low carb space. It's almost like a politician. If you're a Democrat or Republican, if somebody in your party says something that's wrong, can we find a politically correct way to say it's wrong, right? So, or at least to express your opinion about it. So I want to hear your thoughts on carnivore in general. If someone's doing well on carnivore, you know, should they just stick with that, or do you think there's some issues that you would want them to know about that dietary pattern that you would want to raise?
Well, first we have to define what is carnivore. It's just a word, right?
It is.
People have all of these sort of, you've got these zealots who are like, no, like I only do meat and salt, or I only do ribeyes and salt, or I only do grass beef and salt. And then you've got people trickling down who are drinking coffee and carnivore. So right there, things become weird and
Yeah.
convoluted and messy. There's no clear understanding of anything. It's just sort of a trend that started. The carnivore world, first of all, I don't believe anybody does well on the strict carnivore. I think they have moments of clearing up, let's say, certain types of inflammation because you cut out one food. It's just the same thing as veganism. People will stop eating a certain food and do great on veganism for 5 years.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, it's like a bus hits the wall. And I see the same sort of affectation or same type of reality with carnivore diets. And I think that people who say they're doing well are omitting the pitfalls, because there are pitfalls, point blank, period. Anybody doing a carnivore diet will experience electrolyte issues at some point, low blood pressure at some point, potassium deficiency at some point, and they may not recognize the symptoms. I forgot the original question too.
Oh, no,
So,
it's okay.
so I don't go down the tangent too
That's
much.
okay. Just you're funny. So if somebody's doing well on carnivore, is you kinda answered it partly. They may do well on carnivore for a while, but you think eventually they may struggle. So if they're doing well on carnivore, if I use myself as an example, I've only been doing carnivore for a year and a half. I was pretty much I've been in the low carb community for about probably approaching 12 years now. And whenever I guess when I'm more optimal when I minimize plants, right? So, and at some point, I knew I needed electrolytes, so I started doing electrolytes. And I know and maybe that doctor you're speaking of did fruit because he was trying to mitigate the effects of trying to keep up with his electrolytes that were.
He said so.
Yeah, exactly. So
He
there you
admitted
go.
it. Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is, do you interpret this as okay, you can do it for a while, but then at some point, your body's gonna need some things that you need to get from other sources than animals.
Yes.
And I just that's what I wanted to hear because I'm still in that I'm doing wonderful phase, and when I started to add back plants, I don't feel so great. So, and it's more of
Is it
a
the plants or is it your body?
well, I don't know. I mean, I know my microbiome is all, kind of shifted but now don't get me wrong, if I eat an avocado, it's not going to bother me. But if I eat certain things like I would say Brussels sprouts, it's not a good day for me.
Okay,
So
then that's not the food. That's you. You
I
shouldn't
need
eat.
you to clarify what you mean when you say it's me.
Okay.
What do you mean?
You weren't raised in Papua New Guinea or that island off of, I forgot what part of India, or in the Amazons where they probably have perfect guts. We're literally raised, and even they are getting screwed by all the heavy metals that are floating over their way,
Mhm.
with all the engineering. But we are exposed to so many toxins that compromise our systems.
Mm.
We're stuffed with heavy metals. We develop a leaking gut, a weakened immune system, and the human body can eat Brussels sprouts cooked. If you're vaginally birthed, if your mother, okay, the chances of your mother living in a cocoon, eating, having a perfect gut, not being exposed to forever chemicals and
Mhm.
plastics and hormones, disruptors, if she's not exposed to any of this, and the father's sperm quality is amazing, and she ate perfectly well in utero, um, perhaps it would be weird if you ate a Brussels sprout and a cooked Brussels sprout and had problems digesting it. That would be weird.
Mhm.
Then I'd be like, yeah, that's kind of weird. But since we're so toxic, we're toxic from the clothes that we wear. They're plastic. They don't even make stuff anymore out of cotton. Everything's got like polyester in it, a nylon in it, from the dyes to the colors to the air that we breathe to the water that we drink, the municipal water. These little under like carpets and around corners of people don't realize how toxic we are. The Roundup, the pesticides, the dyes, the colors, the fillers, all jack up your gut. All of
Mhm.
it. Yes.
That
Were
makes
you
sense. I mean,
were you vaginally birthed? Were you C-section baby?
right.
Did you get the microbes that you needed? Because otherwise the digestive tract has been compromised. So then when you do eat these plants with anti-nutrients, because they have nutrients and anti-nutrients, they have both.
Mhm. Mhm.
We're omnivorous. We are designed to be able to consume everything. We're
Mhm.
cockroaches. We can consume everything and without a problem. But when you have a problem digesting a food for the short term, I can see if you take something in high in oxalic acid, right? If you take a spinach
Mhm.
that grows wild in lots of the parts of the world, it's a common vegetable that you could handle the oxalate load if you only ate it in season
Mhm.
and you weren't buying it at a supermarket where you could have buckets of it and put it in a blender and make a smoothie out of it. So everything is contextual, which people don't talk about.
Mhm.
Yes. Yeah, I believe it's your body. Since you're a modern human, you are not of the purest, nor am I, nor are you. So yeah, your gut has been compromised.
Yeah. I actually don't disagree with anything you said. I think my gut has been compromised, and although I was a vaginal birth, I mean, who knows how many times I took antibiotics and other factors that are, for lack of better ways, it may have helped in one part of my life, but maybe it was toxic to my gastrointestinal lining. So that all kind of makes sense. But is there, I mean, do you think there's a path for a person who benefits so much from that dietary pattern to then, you know how they, it's almost like you do an elimination diet, then you may be able to bring some things back in. Um, and after you've healed, and is that the kinda approach you take? Because it sounds like you're saying we all should have the capacity. However, some of us have been exposed and we won't do as well. But if we ease some of these things back in, which actually I encourage my patients to consider who go all the way to carnivore, and they add what they tolerate. I'm not to the extreme to say you shouldn't do that, but is that the kinda angle you take? Or but do you think there are people out there that just never will tolerate these things and have to live in this carnivore world?
I think there are some people that might perhaps, and I mean, anything is always possible, so you don't rule out
Mhm.
anything in the upside down world that we live in today. We live in a complete illusion, so everything I'm saying or you're saying could be a bunch of poo poo. So,
Oh, we're
yeah,
in the matrix? Are we in the matrix? Is that what you're saying?
oh, yes.
Okay.
I
I
mean, yeah,
got you.
we're living in a complete fake. I mean, we don't use any of our senses to survive anymore. This is not reality. That's why
Okay.
people suffer from the toxic, and men don't have the need, like moving from Hollywood, California to the South in a small town and looking at the mentality of men, it's like two different species of human, but
Yeah.
in some aspects. And then it's the same when it comes to the gluttony and all of this. But um, the whole concept of being a hunter gatherer is such a beautiful reality to experience. Like I went to Tanzania, and I met the
Mhm.
Maasai, and
Nice.
who are still able to be nomadic. And I remember I was taking pictures of them like crazy, and they allowed me to, right? Because brown on brown, right? They'd be like, okay, but then they were like, but wait, that's a lot of pictures taking. And I was like, that's because you're so beautiful. They're like, is this for a book? I was like, this isn't for no damn books. Calm down. Um, but learning more about the Maasai and their diet and the way that they live as opposed to the modern human, it's
Mhm.
incredible how
Mhm.
sloth and just useless we are. I find that we are
Mm.
very useless. Feel like I have discovered a whole new part of who I am just by leaving this plastic Los Angeles. But as far as carnivore goes, yes, I don't think it is like an interesting concept. It is a fact that we are toxic. And it is a
Mhm.
fact that we are omnivorous. So if you put two and two together, the chances of the fact that our gut hasn't been compromised to be able to digest certain foods that would be eaten in nature would be very weird. So when it comes to carnivore, would I have somebody go do carnivore right away? No. If they don't have to do carnivore, then no. I keep hearing people who follow me say that Michaela Peterson had a problem with beef for a while and had to
Mm.
switch to lamb. Eating these mono foods is what we would not be doing in nature.
Mhm.
So trying to fix the gut, right? Because this is a histamine issue. This is a histamine issue why people cannot tolerate and have joint pain and feel
Mhm.
depressed. And, the anti-nutrients in the plants are outweighing the benefits of the nutrients in the plants for these
Mhm.
particular people. Their guts cannot handle the salicylates and the oxalates and the goitrogens and nightshades, the lectins, saponins. They can't deal with it. But they don't think that way. They just think, well, I'm going to cut it all out and I'm just
Mhm.
going to eat a bunch of beef. What are you talking about? Do you even eat
Mm.
organ meats? Like, make it make sense. So I think that behind the door lies the truth. And I don't think
Mm.
anybody's getting it. If you're eating mono foods, then you're eating mono nutrition and then you're eating mono bacteria. That's not how the body works. So
Mhm.
no, I don't think
Mhm.
anybody does well on carnivore. And if they don't have to do carnivore, I would prefer them to be able to tolerate, for example, how great is milk thistle for the liver? I mean, how
Mhm.
amazing is that? How amazing is oregano oil or oil of oregano for its antimicrobial properties for people who have candida, for example?
Mhm.
Or how amazing it is to take lauric acid in coconut oil for the brain health. Like, how
Mhm.
amazing is that? And also for the antimicrobial properties. So people become too like obsessed with this idea of carnism, and you have all these gurus pushing it like it's the best thing since freaking M&Ms, and and people want to attach themselves to something. I get these people
Mhm.
in my comment section like, this is amazing, I'm doing amazing, and I'm like, anyone who has to say that to some chick on the internet is not confident. Confident person would always be lurking in the quiet areas, not needing to prove anything to anyone at any juncture. They wouldn't have to do that. They would just do their thing and be happy.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, and I do appreciate that perspective. I In my clinical setting, I talk about low carb primarily, and I know that when I get my patients, I used to say 50 total carbs for the day. I'm more in the 20 to 30 range now because when people see me, they're expecting results, and I do better. They do better at reversing many of the chronic conditions when they're tighter. People also come to me because they see podcasts and YouTube videos, and they say, "Man, I want a doctor who will at least not demonize me if I'm doing keto or carnivore or even just low carb." But ultimately, I think what I'm hearing and what I think is true is that most people in my practice will not and are not carnivore. Some struggle so much that we find that they do really well, particularly for, I guess, Michaela's problem, mental illness, some of the uh, cancer diagnoses, et cetera. But ultimately, everybody should have permission, even if they go all the way to that extreme, to start to add back, figure out what their body tolerates, maybe live in that lane. So if I ever, become and I have ketovore days, I'm not like trying to be in a cult and, and live up to the cult's expectations, right? But there are some things I know, and going back to the avocado, I know that won't bother me. So I tend to eat the things that don't bother me, and then maybe we'll have another interview in, I'm going to say 3 years. That'll be 5 years, and then I'll be able to tell you more. And but the reason why I want you to come is because we have to challenge our conventional thinking. And we're all still trying to figure this stuff out. And if we're not courageous enough to have conversations like this, or all of a sudden, all the carnivores are going to put things in the comments saying, she don't know what she's talking about. It saved my life. I think it's very, it's not going to really move
They
us in the
believe
right. Yeah.
they believe that the mind is a powerful place to exist in.
Yeah. I
Sorry.
agree. So I really appreciate that. Now, um, you coach. So because there's so much nuance, like I'll tell a patient, there's something called keto flu or carb withdrawal, whatever you want to call it. So to mitigate that, you need to know if these symptoms occur, maybe you need electrolytes or whatever. So when you're talking to your clients about nutrition, is there like a playbook? Do you kind of allow people to have symptoms and then you tell them why they have it? You may be talking about histamine. And by the way, guys, we're going to do a video short about histamine after this recording for YouTube. So how do you approach a client so that they won't run into these rabbit holes where there's certain things that happen to people when they make these changes? Anything that you kind of prepare them for, or you just kind of wait for them to have issues and then you help them solve it?
People have issues, and then I help solve the Rubik's Cube. So for them, it's very confusing. For me, it's very clear just because,
Mhm.
again, the autodidact trait and the fact that when you go through people who are experiencing very similar abnormalities, when I speak with people, it becomes very evident and clear what is driving their health issues.
Mhm.
So with this whole, let's say, needing fiber thing, because the idea of carnivore sounds great and it will take down your inflammation for the short term, which is why I push it for the short term. And I coach
Mhm.
carnivore because I don't want people to do it wrong. But if you take something that's very common in people, which is a gut dysbiosis,
Mhm.
right? Or they'll have a stuck ileocecal valve and they're either experiencing constipation, loose stool, or they're having gallbladder issues, hypoglycemia, hormonal issues, reproductive issues, chronic fatigue, blood sugar issues. It's always one of those. It's very rare that I get somebody, which I get them sometimes, and they develop it on carnivore, like hemochromatosis, for
Mhm.
example. Um, but or some genetic abnormalities where this woman, she has, what was it again? I gotta look at my paperwork.
Yeah, look
I
at your
know.
paperwork. It's funny.
Yes. She was diagnosed with mixed connective tissue disease.
Tissue. Yeah.
Yeah. And she always has what's called, was it panacea topenia, low blood low
Yeah.
blood cells, and
Yeah.
she's got low white blood cell count.
Mhm.
And most people don't have these types of issues, right? Most people are
Mm-mm.
experiencing the same thyroid, chronic fatigue, brain fog, depression, blood sugar dysregulation, polycystic ovarian syndrome, low testosterone, high DHT, whatever.
Mhm.
People have these things, blah, 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 blah. So when I talk to them, they've been promised the golden egg if they just go
Mm.
carnivore,
Right.
and they'll feel good at first and they'll listen to someone like me and they'll say like, oh, she's full of shit, like I feel great. And then they'll come back to me because or they're like, today I had a person before you where he's a young guy. I ticked boxed everything. He was like, I did carnivore and he did fasting for 6 to 8 months. He's done carnivore. He's got foamy urine.
Mm.
So if you have foamy urine, what's that from? Why you got foamy urine? You're only 21 years old. Why do you have
Right.
foamy urine? Why do you have flaky skin, acne? Like, what is that? For
Mm.
him, it's confusing. For me, it's very clear.
Mhm.
So I start asking people about, were you breastfed? Were you vaginally birthed? Have you had antibiotic treatments? Are you on any
Mm.
kind of medications? Um, I asked these questions to this young guy today, and then we start going into, and I'll listen to them. I want to hear their personality. because who you are is indicative of how your body's going to move forward,
Mhm.
right? So this guy was 21, more young, more naive, more quiet. Then I got people who are older who think they know everything and they're agitated, irritated, they almost want to start arguing with you. And then you've got people who are just lost, they're just desperate and they want to just try these trends. So when I talk to my clients, we have a conversation. I want to figure out who they are, how they tick, and then start implementing lifestyle, their dietary lifestyle, their lifestyle. Do they go to bed really late? Do they have the phone next to their head? Do they watch
Mhm.
TV? Um, and also the gallbladder plays a really big role in these low carb diets, because if you're having issues with that, the gallbladder and histamine, or not histamine, if you're having gallbladder issues and blood sugar issues, then sometimes you can't even choose the dietary measure or the diet, air quotes, that you're going to choose, because your body won't allow you to eat those foods, even if it's meat. Like, oh, my gallbladder, so I'm so sludged up, I can't even do high fat carnivore. I can't. I
Mhm.
just fail at it. So I got to choose, either I do this horrible carb nonsense or I do carnivore. Those are really difficult cases because they don't do
Mhm.
well on their gallbladders jacked up, but they don't do well on carbs. Like, they have a
Mhm.
histamine response to it. Anyway, I just kind of go by the individual and I have them fill out a form before I even have a consultation with them. It's a pretty extensive form, and I ask the questions based on the repetitive issues that people have,
That's right.
and then I like look at it, and then from there I'll start like putting together the details they didn't think about, and then we start trying to find solutions together.
Yeah. Well, again, it sounds like functional medicine training, and that they force us to kind of go back to the beginnings when they were even maybe even before they were born. What was your mom and dad doing, before you were created, and certainly during the pregnancy and after. And I think those are really important questions, and I think it is nuanced, which is why you need to have a coach or a clinician who understands this sometimes in front of you to kind of help walk you through um, these topics. I do a similar thing in clinic. I have an obesity clinic, and my form is probably like 8 pages long, and the whole point of it is to, what are common threads? Tell me about your past, and then I can, because they tend to come to me when they've struggled elsewhere to lose weight, right? So I think that approach is how healthcare should be practiced. But what do you do in a world where you're not talking to a consultant or coach like yourself, but you're talking to a doctor who has 15 minutes? It's just, so it's a just,
15? They do
yeah,
8 minutes. 8 minutes. Yes. When I was in California, it's eight minutes per a patient walking in, and they
oh
try
my
to
God.
max like your garden variety, urologist, cardiologist.
Wow.
Doesn't matter. It's 8 minutes, and then they try to smash as many as they can in a workday. 8 minutes a person.
Wow. That's and ironically, it's a little better in that in my clinic, a lot of the doctors have gone to more of a 20-minute model, but let me tell you, it's pretty bad. And so when you have that person in front of you who wants to do keto or carnivore, and you mentioned pancytopenia as an example, where you have low white counts, low red blood cells, low platelets. It's like all of those things together. And that may be part of their story. But if you're going so fast, you'll just say, hey, even if you were a doctor who dealt with nutrition, say, hey, eat this diet and move on, take this pill and move on. And you never get to the root cause. So I think that is the future of medicine if we can ever get there. And it's exactly what we need. Yeah, well, I'm
No,
more optimistic than you, Stephanie.
no. We live in a world that is, you study history, and every 70 years, you have the ruling class and you have everybody else. And we
Mm,
have, we have been living, people don't realize, especially in the US, we have been living in we were born in a period where we've been chilling. We've been
mm.
just cruising. That's over. We're done.
Wow.
And, if you look at even the carnivore world, when people have power and influence, it's really interesting what humans do. I mean, we are designed to be in 20 to 25 people groups max to
Mhm.
survive. And that makes sense. Everybody has their role in a tribe. But when you start expanding upon that, and we're out of an egalitarian society, and we've got hierarchy and we've got peasantry, you will always have corruption.
Yeah.
And systems don't work. And science is no longer science. It can be just whatever people make up. And if you go all the way through to Ansel Keys and his 20, what is it, 27, 22 country, that I forgot what it's called, but
Yeah.
where he was saying that saturated fat gives you a
Yeah.
heart attack. I think people today who, like, the people who hear you will hear you. I am, if I was annoying before in my energy days, in my old videos, when I was like, energy, people thought I was dumb as, like, the Chrissy Hines from Three's Company TV show. They thought I
Mhm.
was like, like a airhead blonde. But no, science will improve, but it'll only improve for the meanings of power, influence, and profit, and
Mhm.
nothing else. So in that, we might get a little lucky with certain things. But, like, if they're able to put, let's say, technology in you, and
Mhm.
it can help you hear again or see again or walk again, will that technology be used for good, or can that technology be used for evil?
Right. Yeah. Well, how about a compromise? This is what I do with my wife. I say, okay, I hear that perspective. I have mine. How about we just assume that the bubbles that we live in, where we're spreading the message of healing, will reach a certain segment of the population and they will do better than the folk
That
who
is true.
never. So let's go with that. Can we
We
go in
can
that
hope for
direction?
that.
Okay,
But
cool. So we're
there's
good.
not that many people who live in the reality that I live in. Like, I've got friends, when I left California after the whole, I'm going to say rhymes with Slovid era,
Mhm.
when I left, I was like, get out of here. Because they allowed the homeless, they allowed so much debauchery and foolery.
Oh yeah.
And people
Yeah.
don't understand this is a design to completely break down society. So new implementation of laws and rules can come in and you'll beg for it.
Mhm.
Please make
Okay.
it like this. You will beg for it. And it
Right.
is not a coincidence, nor is it an accident that things have gotten so weird. It's
Okay.
done and it's been designed on purpose. And when you watch these videos from the 60s and 70s of the social experiment, like, there's this video of a guy walking in. Okay, there's people waiting in a doctor's office, waiting in the waiting room. And every time that somebody goes to the doctor, a beep will go off, and everybody in the room is an actor except for the people walking in. Each person who walks in doesn't know that this is a science experiment, a social experiment rather. So every time a beep goes off, everybody in the whole room stands up and then sits down. The person's like, "What? This is ridiculous." But on the third beep, that person starts to stand up. Then new
Right.
people come in who are not actors and so forth, and it continues on till everybody is out and has been to the doctor. Now there's just one person in the room that was the non-actor, and another non-actor walks in. But the first person was trained to sit up and sit down, and the second one comes in and starts doing it too.
Wow.
That's society. So how many people, and there are a lot of us, but there's just not enough,
I know.
break that illusion? People say, like, what do you do when you're out at a dinner eating this way? What do you do when you're at a restaurant?
Right.
I feel so much pressure. I feel like I'm going to fall off the wagon.
Mm,
See what I mean? These are people in the matrix. They
that's
think
right.
that this reality is that it matters how somebody sees you eating. And I'm like, but you get sick when you eat processed food or plants.
Mhm.
Let's you know
Mhm.
let's keep it real. Some people can't eat certain foods. Like Michaela Peterson is a great example. And I have a lot of clients that can't eat any plants. They have to even boil their meats because they're so reactive.
Wow.
Um, what and these people will fall off the wagon for the fear of standing out in a social
Mhm.
situation.
Yep.
So that's why we're living in a very strange time, because not only must you be an outlier, but you gotta smash it and break it to tiny little bits where everything that is expressed that must be done in a group think, you go way beyond that and refuse to go with any group think.
Yeah. Yeah. I love that. And again, that's why I love coaching. I just started working with a trainer. And I'm going to share some videos with her as well. And I'll go there since you have this, you still look like you're in your 30s, which is great. So, so how important has exercise been? I mean, I know you were a skateboarder, so this is who you are. But when you talk to clients, where does exercise fit on the spectrum?
I think it fits with everything. I think they're all equal, huge parts of slices of the pie. We are designed to be constantly moving, and people are in static positions all day, every day, all day, every day, all day, every day. And they're in
Mhm.
static positions and they're not getting outside. So there's levels of this human body, the way we're designed to be moving. So when you move and the cells become oxygenated and blood is flowing and you're bringing nutrients to the cells, it's fantastic what happens metabolically when
Mhm.
you not only just go to the gym, because if you hate it, you're not going to have the same mind to body
Right.
connection.
Right.
When you really love that movement of the body, then you can see that things like blood sugar will start to stabilize,
That's
inflammation will
right.
go down to
That's
a
right.
certain level when you use the body the way it was designed to be used. It's so
Everything's
important.
better. Everything's better. Your mind I'll be honest, it's challenging when I'm with the trainer and I'm just like, "Is it over yet?" But man, I I really love how I feel the rest of the day, the next day, the day after that. All aspects of my life are better. So for those who are in this low carb community and you haven't added exercise, when you're able to, assuming that your body will allow you, please, you are just scratching the surface on how great you're going to feel. So I really appreciate that. And and for those who are checking us out today, we're gonna, like I said, do another video shortly after this recording. I know you want to hear more from Stephanie, who has a slightly different perspective, but I really appreciate it. So I I just want to kind of, I think I'm just gonna ask you, how you plan on protecting your nest. You're kind of already doing a lot of different things, right? So are there areas in your life that you are still really wanting to address that you haven't really at the level you want to? Like what's that thing you're really trying to get better at?
Um, I don't think there's that thing I'm trying to get better at because I have done near like put my body to the brink
Mhm.
to take myself there. So, for example, I was living in Hollywood and I was bored, and I was in Hollywood. Like I would go to
Mm.
you know private parties with like famous people, and I would feel absolutely disgusted. I felt, and I was driving around a 1995 Honda Civic that I would hand off to a valet. I'm like,
Yeah. Right.
um, um, I feel like the getting connecting to nature is probably the driving force. Like everything else, I feel like I have faced myself with fears and insecurities. I'm very well aware of things that I'm insecure of and things that I feel that I need to do better as a human being. But for example, like I'm living in everybody hunts world. And I'm like, so when I first moved here, they're like, somebody said, I'm going to go and, hunt some deer. Do you want some? And I said, yeah. Okay, well, you got to process it. I was like, okay, as long as I don't have to shoot the deer, then I'll process it. So I processed the deer, and it was really weird because it was so stiff. It was hung. It was, we were trying to get the guts out and hang it, and it was so stiff that I just kept feeling like my horse's legs. I was like, get over it. That kind of reconditioning, because hunting is natural, and
Mhm.
I'm coming from wokety woke land of California, and all of those idealisms I I subscribe to, because, and I wasn't really hardcore about it. It's just
Mhm.
like a slow mental conditioning over time. But to go from that reality to the South, I moved to an all white town where I was warned not to do that, um, by several people back where I'm born and raised. And so I think, and by the way, these people have been absolutely lovely, lovely. But the reality is, me trying to be human again is
Mhm.
the goal. So to not feel so freaked out to take an animal and unalive it is something that I'm working towards, because that's what would be natural in nature.
Mm.
So that's something.
Okay.
But anything else, like, oh, I want to do jujitsu, I want to travel more. I've traveled, I've done new things. Like, that's nothing new. I want to be able to build a house by myself with my own hands. But that's achievable. That's not a hard
Yeah.
thing to learn. It's like, whatever.
Cool.
So I'm not like, oh, or my perception of myself, um, being a woman, single, finding my attractiveness. That was more highly driven when I was in Los Angeles. I'm from that ilk. I'm from that superficial world. It's not completely gone, nor should it be.
Mhm.
But at the end of the day, the importance of it is, like, I don't care anymore. So yes, when I'm trying to be fit, it's not for so much for the validation of people anymore, because there's nobody to validate it to.
Right.
Now it's like, can I run and grab my horse by the mane and jump on it bareback? Can I do things? Can I lift a heavy hay bale?
All right, guys. Looks like Stephanie had to go tend to her lovely dog, and what no better time to do that than now, since we were at the end of the video. Make sure to go to Stephanie's YouTube channel, Stephanie Keto Person. I'll make sure to have a link in the video notes. And as we conclude, I want to share that today you learned that it's okay to challenge your beliefs about how you eat, and that there are also many reasons why you may have struggled. When you struggle, that does not mean that your preferred dietary pattern is not the best diet for you, but it may be due for a little tweaking. Never forget that our bodies are constantly changing, and what worked for us in the past may not be as effective now. By being open to making adjustments to our diet, we can ensure that we are meeting our nutritional needs and feeling our best. So don't be afraid to experiment with different foods and adjusting how you eat when needed, because when you listen to your body, we will be able to collect the necessary data to solve any problem that may arise. As usual, I thank you for coming to this episode of the Protecting Your Nest podcast. And until the next episode, continue to be safe, be well, and continue to protect your nest.